Asalaamu alaikum and welcome back to Reborn Muslim, the podcast by and for reverts to Islam. I'm your host Avalon, and today I want to talk about what you need to know before going to a masjid for the first time. So this is relevant for anybody who's never been to a Muslim house of worship or a masjid. But of course it's going to be especially relevant for reverts because those are usually the groups of people who are interested, of course, in going to a masjid and have never been. But I mention that because, of course, there's going to be some non-Muslims who are also interested in, visiting a masjid, whether it's because they're interested in Islam or because, they want to support a Muslim family member or friend or whatever it might be. So I just want to include that kind of disclaimer that this is for anybody who's going to a masjid for the first time. It's some important things to keep in mind, some things you might be thrown off guard by. But it's definitely going to be from the perspective of a revert and for reverts as well, because we're going to get into some things about prayer. So with all of that being said, Bismillah, let's get started. So the way I'm going to be coming at this is the things that I wish someone had told me or the things that caught me off guard before I went to a masjid for the first time. So as is the case with pretty much everything I talk about on this podcast, on my YouTube channel, on my Instagram page, I come from the perspective of I wish I knew these things, and so I'm going to share the things I know now with newer reverts. So even if this isn't your first time per se, hopefully this will put things into context if you did have lingering questions about the first time you did go to a masjid. So first, let's talk about the difference between masjid and mosque before we even talk about the actual things you should know, because this is actually one of the things you should know before going. So if you're unfamiliar, you might be wondering, why am I saying masjid instead of mosque? Because usually people think okay, the Christian house of worship is a church and the Jewish house of worship is a synagogue. So, the Muslim house of worship is a mosque. Well, that's not quite true. It's true and it's not true. And so what I mean by that is when we say mosque, that is referring to a specific part inside the bigger structure. What the actual structure is called is the masjid. So that's the equivalent of church. And if you're familiar with going to church, you know that the room that everyone congregates in for Sunday service is usually referred to as a sanctuary. So the mosque is the equivalent of the sanctuary, not of the church. The Muslim equivalent of church is masjid. That's the name of the structure. That's the whole thing, because of course it's not only going to be a prayer room. So the mosque is just the prayer room. That's just the prayer hall. I've also heard it called musalla. I don't honestly know the difference, but that's something to know as well. It might be called that. But that's the prayer hall. That's where we do our prayers. And sometimes certain events will be held in there. But generally anything other than prayer is going to be held elsewhere in the masjid, because there's going to be other rooms. There's going to be maybe women's only rooms. There might be an NPR. Oftentimes there's an NPR multi-purpose room. So the entire thing is the masjid. Mosque is just the prayer hall. That's just where we do our prayers and have, other types of events. But that's what that room is. So with that in mind, if you're going to the masjid for the first time and you're a revert, chances are you're going to pray, because that's the main reason that we all go to masjids is to pray. So something you should know before going into the actual prayer room, into the mosque, is that you're going to need to take your shoes off. So plan accordingly. So this might sound so random. It's why are you even mentioning it? Well, this is why. So I have worn outfits before where it's not ideal as a Muslima. To give you an example, it's a short skirt, but then I'm wearing leggings underneath to cover my legs, and then tall boots that are not tight or anything. So they, kind of cover the shape of my legs, but they're pretty tall. So then when I put all of that together, only a little bit of my, form of my legs are showing through you see the leggings basically. Hopefully that makes sense. So I've worn that before to the masjid for an event. And then I didn't even think about it when I had to go into the mosque, into the actual prayer room. I had to take my shoes off, and then now I'm just wearing a short skirt with leggings, which is not something I would typically wear because, again, my legs are being, it's form-fitting. I don't want to show that. And so that's why I say plan accordingly. Know that you're going to have to take your shoes off. Even if you're a guy and you're wearing sandals and you don't like to wear you don't like to walk barefoot for whatever reason, just keep that in mind. So maybe wear shoes, that have socks, or even bring socks with you. Honestly, I do that because I don't really like to walk on carpet barefoot if I can avoid it. I don't know why. Like if I'm at like just somewhere else than home, I would rather not walk on the carpet barefoot. I don't know why. It's just, I don't know. So when I wear sandals, which is quite often because I live in California, it's really hot here. So I'll wear sandals a lot, and then I'll just remember to bring socks with me. Like I'll just bring little like ankle socks or something, just so that I'm not just walking barefoot on the carpet. There's nothing wrong with that. I'm not saying you have to do that. I'm just trying to highlight the fact that you are going to have to take your shoes off. So just keep that in mind. Don't wear shoes that are going to take a really long time to get off and, hold up the like shoe area, because there's usually an area outside of the prayer room where you can leave your shoes. And so if you're there on Jummah prayer, for example, where everyone's there, and you're wearing these like really strappy shoes that take 5 minutes to take off, it's going to be annoying. You know what I mean? Like you're going to be holding up the space. So again, just keep that in mind. Wear something that can easily come on and off and plan accordingly. Next thing related to shoes is your dress code. So the dress code is going to be the same thing as our normal dress code as Muslims. This might be new information if you are a non-Muslim and you're visiting a masjid for the first time. But if you're a revert, inshaAllah, you already know this. But it's just important to keep in mind, like specifically when you go into the prayer room, if you're a woman, your hair should be covered. It's respectful, even if you're not a hijabi or full-time hijabi or whatever it might be. It's very important to cover your hair in the prayer room. That's a respectful thing to do. And it's like, if you're not a hijabi because of, you're kind of worried about safety or whatever it might be, if you're safe anywhere, it's a mosque, okay? It's a masjid. Like everyone else is going to be wearing it too. So definitely bring a scarf with you if you're not a hijabi yet, but inshallah, you've already started wearing the hijab in life. Other than the hijab though, there's rules for men and women. It's like rules, yes, but like really it's just, you should wear these things to be respectful. It's not about like someone coming up and being like, oh, you can't come in here because you're wearing that. You know what I mean? That's not the point. The point is you should wear these things, again, to be respectful. This is a place of worship. This is a place where we gather for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, for his sake. So we should be dressing accordingly. So for women, we should be wearing loose clothing, not form-fitting. Again, that's why I mentioned being embarrassed about the leggings situation. So try to wear something loose, not form-fitting, whether that's a skirt and a top or a dress or, really loose pants and a long shirt, whatever it might be. Loose clothing doesn't show your form, and again, having your hair covered. For men, again, this is just going to be the normal dress code. You should not be wearing shorts. You should not be wearing anything that, is cover or not covering the knees, basically. So ideally, just like wear pants, and it should not be form-fitting also. So yeah, it's just the normal dress code that we should be abiding by anyways. But if there's anywhere that you're going to abide by it, it should definitely be here, because it's a sign of respect. Okay, so this tip is going to be specifically for my sisters, for the ladies. So in case you're not aware, there might be a separate entrance for women. So be sure to ask someone to make sure you're going in the right one. Now, nobody should be making you feel bad about it if you do go into the main entrance that's usually only men, and then, there was a separate entrance and you didn't go in there. No one should be making you feel bad. No one should be guilting you, shaming you, anything like that. It shouldn't be this, huge thing of like, oh no, I messed up and now I'm in the wrong place, because that's just expected to happen, especially for new Muslims, or not even just for new Muslims. It could just be for someone who has never been to that masjid before. You know what I mean? Like maybe they go to a different one, or they're from out of town and they're visiting. And maybe the masjid they go to, everyone enters in the same place. So it's not even just new Muslims. So they should expect that can happen sometimes, because honestly, sometimes they really are slacking off on the women's section and they make it extremely hard to find the entrance, which is not okay. But not all masjids are like that, so don't think it's going to be like that, but that can happen. So especially in that case, they cannot expect you to have found it and be mad at you for not finding it. So don't get anxiety about this. Don't think like, oh no, I'm going to enter in the wrong way. I always used to get anxiety about it. Honestly, it's really not a big deal. But this is what I do just to make the situation a little less awkward and a little easier for myself. So let's say you're, again, at the masjid for Jummah prayer, because that's a very common reason to go. So it's Friday, a bunch of people are there. what I do is, first of all, this is a tip just in general for going to prayer. Always get there early. Just as a general rule, you never know if you need to make wudu or not, whatever it might be. You don't know if there's going to be traffic. Just always get there early. And so assuming that you got there early, wait in your car for a bit or wait outside for a bit, however you got there. See where the women are going. Okay, if there's women around, see which way they're going. That's like my plan A, is I just look at where the women are going and then I just follow one in. And then it's easy. You don't even have to ask anyone. You just see which section they go to. Sometimes you're not going to see a lot of women going in, or it might be such an obscure entrance that you actually don't even know where it is. You know what I mean? So like the women are going in, but it's like on the other side of the building. So in that case, you can always ask a brother if there's someone out, if there's someone like greeting at the door. Sometimes, like, especially for Jummah prayer, like there might be somebody outside. At some of the masjids I go to, at least there are. So if there's a situation like that, you can always just go up and say, hey, like, I'm sorry, like, is this the sister's entrance or is there a separate one? Can I go in through here? They should be happy to tell you. That should not be a problem. Like, it should be a very easy conversation. Especially if there's a sister outside, even if you don't see her going in, that would be like my plan B, is just go up and ask her, hey, is there a separate, sister's entrance? And then if there's not a woman outside, you can always just ask a man, you can ask a brother. But again, nobody should be giving you a problem. It shouldn't be a big deal. I just want to tell you, just so you keep it in mind, so you're not caught off guard when you go in through the front entrance and then all of a sudden, wait, why are there no women? So it's just something to keep in mind. Just know there might be a separate entrance. And it also might not be a thing where you have to go in through that entrance, because I feel like, at least for the masjids out here in Southern California that I've been to, usually it's like there's a main entrance, then there's a women's only entrance, but it's not like they're mutually exclusive. Like anyone can go in through the main entrance, but only women can go in through the women's only entrance. You see what I mean? So it's like if you want extra privacy, you can go in through that direction, through the women's only door. And if you don't care, you can just go through the front door and then find your way to the women's section. So usually that's how it ends up being, for me at least. It's not even a big deal. Like no one's even going to look at you weird if you go in through the main entrance. But if in case you want extra privacy, or in case it's a masjid where like generally all women go through that entrance, it's just something good to keep in mind. Another thing that might catch you off guard, especially if you're a revert, is, so let's say like you've been a revert for a while now, you've been praying at home, you do your 5 daily prayers and everything. When you get to the masjid, you might be surprised to see people praying 2 rak'ah before prayer even starts, because you're probably aware of the sunnah prayers, right? Like most of them are afterwards. Like for Fajr, it's 2 rak'ah before, and then the 2 rak'ah of Fard or obligatory. So that's the one exception that I know of, where the sunnah is actually beforehand. The sunnah meaning the voluntary prayers that you can do if you want to, but you don't have to. But of course, the Prophet ﷺ did those prayers, so it's good to do them. However, usually for like the other 4 prayers, the sunnahs are going to come after. So for example, for Dhuhr, there's 4 obligatory rak'ah, right? Like there's 4 units of prayer that you have to do. And then you can do 2 sunnah rak'ah after the 4. So they're afterwards. So you see what I'm saying? So you might be surprised, again, let's say you're going for Jummah, you get there and people are praying already, but the prayer hasn't even started. Like, what's that about? That's how I felt the first time I went. I was like, wait, what the heck? Why are people already praying? So I was not aware that there's 2 rak'ah that you can do when you're greeting the masjid. That's kind of how it's referred to. So basically, the first time you enter in the masjid of the day, let's say you're going to be there for a while, and you're going again for Jummah. When you first enter in, you have wudu and everything, you go to your section, you can do 2 rak'ah. And that is a sunnah. That's something that the Prophet ﷺ would do. So it's not obligatory. It's not something you have to do. It's something you can do if you want. So when you get there, again, it's good. You can do that. You just do 2 rak'ah, just like Fajr, and then you just wait for the prayer to start. But it is not obligatory. So let's say like you're running late. Like let's say that you just got there right on time and they're just about to start the prayer. They already did the call to prayer and they're already getting started. In that case, I personally, and Allah knows best, again, I'm not a scholar or anything, I wouldn't really worry about that because it's a sunnah. It's not required. Just worry about the prayer that's happening right now. You see what I'm saying? But again, like I said, try to get there early. That's another reason to get there early, so that you can do your 2 rak'ah beforehand, because it's good to do them, but don't stress out if you don't. So it's just something to keep in mind, so that you won't be confused when you look around and think, wait, people are already praying? Yes, people are already praying. There's 2 rak'ah that you can do. So on the topic of rak'ah, if you're going for Jummah, as I've been using that example, if you are going for Jummah, you'll be used to praying 4 rak'ah, like we already talked about. So you pray the 4 units of prayer for Dhuhr, because Jummah prayer is Dhuhr on Friday. So it's the noon-ish prayer on Fridays, right? That's Jummah. That's the one we do in congregation. So you're used to doing it 4. And that's how many you are supposed to do it is 4. However, when you go to Jummah prayer specifically, so only for Dhuhr prayer on Friday, it's only going to be 2. I don't know the reasoning behind it. Allah knows best. I'm sure if you ask a scholar or a sheikh, they can give you the reasoning behind it and all of the nuance. All I know and all I'm telling you here is just keep that in mind. It's not going to be 4 units. But let's say you go for Asr on Friday, or you go for Dhuhr on Thursday, the day before. It's going to be 4. It's going to be the same as usual. The way you're used to praying, however, like the amount of rak'ah that you're used to praying for each prayer is going to be exactly the same any other time. As far as I know, the only time when one of the actual, obligatory prayers is changed in that way is for Jummah prayer. So that's something that definitely caught me off guard, because I was like, wait, why did they only do 2? Like, am I like missing something? Does this have to do with the 2 that people did beforehand? Like, I was so confused the first time I went, because again, I was used to praying 4 rak'ah for Dhuhr, and then all of a sudden now we're praying 2, but it's only for Jummah prayer. So that's something to know. Just keep that in mind. They didn't mess up. The imam didn't end early. It's only 2. And then, of course, you can pray your sunnah after. It's encouraged to do that. You definitely should do that. But the actual prayer is only going to be 2 rak'ah. Okay, and the last thing I'm going to mention is just sort of a general thing that you should keep in mind, again, to lower your anxiety about the situation, and so that you're not caught off guard or confused about what you're seeing at the masjid. So you will be used to praying in a certain way. Inshallah, you learned from a really good, reputable source, whether it was a mentor or a book or video or however you learn to pray, you're used to praying in a certain way. When you get to the masjid, you will see little differences in how people pray. I'm not talking about major differences, like they say different things and they do the prayer differently. They do different actions and they pray a different number of rak'ah. Not huge differences like that. That would be worrisome. Inshallah, you won't see that. I'm talking about very little differences. So I'll give you an example. So when we do the takbir in prayer, which is when you say Allahu Akbar during salah, generally there's 2 ways of approaching it. We all know that when we're starting the very, very start of the prayer, we all put our hands up next to our head, right? That's how we do the takbir. And then we put our hands, on our chest, or, over each other on our chest. So everybody does that. Regardless, everyone does that. However, the difference comes when you're starting a new rak'ah. So let's say you did the first rak'ah, you did the first unit. Now back up to the start. They say Allahu Akbar. Some people will put their hands up again, and they'll keep doing that for every unit. So let's say it's Asr, it's a 4-unit prayer. They'll do that 4 times. Every time we go up all the way to the top to start the new rak'ah, they'll put their hands up again. Other people will only put their hands up the first time, and then they'll never do that again for the rest of the prayer during the when the takbir comes. They won't put their hands up again. So hopefully that makes sense how I explain that. So let's say you're the way I was used to doing it was only putting my hands up the first time. And then I went to the masjid and I looked around and I'm like, wait a second. Some people are putting their hands up every single time, every the start of every rak'ah. I'm so confused. Why are some people doing that? Why have I not learned about that? You know what I mean? So then I thought that I was doing something wrong. I just felt awkward and I felt oh gosh, everybody's looking at me, especially, which first of all, nobody's looking at you. Nobody cares. It just feels that way in your head. But especially if a lot of people are doing it one way and you've been taught to do it the other way. That can be really nerve-wracking because it feels like you're wrong in that situation. But the reality is you're probably not wrong and they're probably not wrong either. It's most likely just a difference in school of thought. So some school of thoughts will do it one way, some school of thoughts will do it another way. It's not about who's right, who's wrong. You should never do it this way. You have to do it this way. These are such small differences that they're not things that you need to stress out about. They actually have reasons behind it. So the schools of thought, if you don't know about them, it's not the most important thing, I would say, but it's definitely something to learn about. Again, as I always say, refer to a sheikh, a scholar, somebody who actually knows a lot about that and can tell you all the details. I can't tell you the details, but what I can tell you is that they come from different people who kind of started these schools of thought or started, analyzing Islam in this way. And none of them have outrageous differences. Okay. You're never going to find a school of thought that it's because there's a few main ones. It's not like one of the main schools of thought is oh yeah, we don't think Muhammad is actually the last prophet. That's not, you know what I'm saying? You're never going to find something like that. It's very small differences for the most part. At least when it comes to prayer, especially these are not massive differences whatsoever. So, but it still can feel weird because you're wait, have I been doing this wrong for as long as I've been praying? I thought I was doing it the right way. Again, chances are you're not doing it wrong. You're just doing it according to a school of thought that maybe this person doesn't follow. So they do it differently. But the thing to keep in mind, as I already mentioned, is that the schools of thought have reasoning behind everything. They have hadith to back it up. They have Quran verses that the way they interpreted it, it backs up why they do what they do. So nobody's wrong. It's just a difference of opinion. However, if you find yourself in that situation of being in prayer and realizing somebody's doing some part differently than you, don't rely on the idea of, oh, well, it's probably just a difference of opinion, so I'm not going to look into it. Definitely don't do that. Definitely look into it, whether that means asking the person, asking the imam at the masjid, asking a sheikh, however it might be. Ideally, it would be best to ask the imam of the actual masjid, because he's going to have better information. However, pursue the answer on that. Try to find out what the difference is and where it comes from, because there is definitely a possibility that you are doing it wrong. There's also a possibility that they're doing it wrong. And for some reason, they've always done it that way. You know what I mean? Inshallah, that's not the case. But most likely, if somebody was wrong, it's probably us as a revert, because we don't pray for our whole life. And then we have to figure it out. You know what I mean? So that definitely happens. That is 100% a possibility. So don't brush it off and just think, oh, well, it's just a difference of opinion, so the way I'm doing it is probably fine. It might be wrong. Definitely operate on the assumption that you might be wrong. So you need to find out if you're doing it right. However, once you've looked into that, you found out, if you do find out that, oh, it's just a difference of opinion, then don't worry about it. I wouldn't recommend okay, I'm going to switch to this one now, or I'm this school of thought or that school of thought. That's not really something for a new revert to be looking into, because, or not that you can't look into it, it's just it's not something to really identify yourself as, I would say, just because it's you're not going to know enough about it. I don't know nearly enough about the schools of thought to be oh yeah, I'm this school of thought and that's just the one I follow. Generally, from what I understand, again, Allah knows best, but from what I understand is you should just follow the school of thought that the masjid that you go to most, let's say your local masjid, whichever one they follow, just follow that one. It's really that simple. It's not even a big deal. So yeah, I definitely wouldn't recommend trying to figure out for yourself, oh, I'm this school of thought or that. So don't let it, go down a rabbit hole, but definitely do find out, am I doing this right? Am I doing it wrong? Oh, it's a difference of opinion. Okay, leave it alone then. But it's that's one of the advantages of starting to go to the masjid, honestly, for us reverts, is that we start to realize things that we actually are doing wrong. Because I've had both experiences. I've had experiences where I thought I was doing something wrong, and then I find out, oh no, some people just do it that way because of the school of thought. They have reasoning for it, but I do it differently because that's the way I was trained, or the way I learned. And then I've also found out that I was doing things genuinely wrong. I realized from praying in congregation and seeing other people around me that, oh wow, I'm actually doing things wrong, and I had no clue, and I would have never found it out until I started praying around other people, because how would you find out? You know what I mean? How else would you figure that out if you're just praying alone and doing it wrong every day? So that definitely has happened to me too. So even if that happens and you realize that you're wrong about something, don't feel bad. Don't let anyone make a problem with you if they try to tell you, oh, you do this wrong or whatever. Don't let anyone do that to you. Don't feel bad. Don't feel anxiety about it. We all make mistakes as reverts in learning these things, and chances are you thought you were doing it right. You weren't doing anything wrong. You didn't think you were, nobody thinks they're praying wrong. You know what I mean? So just don't feel bad about it. Just use that as a learning experience. So those are all the things I wanted to mention. Inshallah, that'll be useful. Again, whether you're a revert or a non-Muslim who's visiting a masjid, these are just important things to keep in mind so that you're not caught off guard, and things that I wish somebody had told me before I went. So I hope that was useful, and I really appreciate your support. I will see you again very soon, inshallah. Asalaamu alaikum.